Welcome to the Peerless YouTube. I am Caitie North, and today we are going to be starting our portrait mini series, and we are going to be doing 3 different portraits. So the first one's going to be in grayscale, the second is going to be with 3 colors, and then the third and last one will be with 8 colors. So I'm very excited. I absolutely love doing portraits, and it was a little bit of a challenge to get enough detail in all of the style that I like. But still making the class short enough. So I think it works out, and I think it's a good class. Yeah, I can't wait to see your portraits, and hopefully you'll be able to do portraits of anybody, family or friends or models or reference photos that you have with what you learned. So I can't wait to see them. Let's get started.
For your supplies, you will be needing Peerless Watercolors. Today we are going to be using the Peerless Black, watercolor paper and brush, reference photo, pencil, a Lightbox, and a white gel pen or white ink. So this is a little bit longer tutorial, and I kind of do it as we're going, so we're just going to jump right in. So I found this photo on my phone on either maybe Instagram or Pinterest or any kind of area that you can search reference photos, and all I did was save it on my phone. So now we are going to open it up in our iPhone or whatever phone you have and change it to black and white so you can see just the grayscale. So you can play with all of the settings in here too if you would like more light or less light, more contrast or a softer. I would like a little bit in between, a high contrast, but enough where you could see some shadows like on the nose on the other side of the face, and so it's not completely washed out. But whatever you want to do that you're comfortable with making your reference photo from. Then, next step, all you're going to do is print it on your home printer, the same size, like the biggest size that you can with a, I think it's, like 8.5 by 11. Printer paper, and print it out. So then you're going to have something like this. So now you are going to outline all of the areas that are going to make up her face, including her eyebrows, her nose, her lips, eyes, eyelashes, the shape of her face, anything that would kind of make it look like a coloring book with those edges all around. And then the next step is you're going to want to trace all of the shadows. So where you see on the side of the nose and the cheekbone area, you kind of just want to trace all around those edges so you know kind of where those shapes in the cheekbones are coming down. This is a really easy and kind of a cheat way to do a portrait, especially if you're trying to copy someone that you know or someone from a reference photo and you're not comfortable sketching it out on your own, or you don't have the time to do it on your own. There's a lot of ways to do it. You could do like that grid method where you grid out the reference photo and then you grid your paper, like your drawing next to it, and you can kind of work from one corner and one box at a time. But this way you're able to exactly draw your reference photo and anyone that you would like and get an idea of that face shape and their bone structure and where their eyes and even their eyelashes. So, I say it's a cheat, but I feel like a lot of people do it, and it doesn't take away from how awesome your painting is in the end, and it is a absolutely great way to start learning as well. So, now that you have all of those lines on there, we are going to be tracing it onto another piece of computer paper. This way is you just get the line work a little bit more defined, especially if you're doing it for the first time before you put it on the watercolor paper, and you can kind of get an idea of how well you did, and maybe you kind of want to go back and just kind of make things a little bit more clear. And yeah, you can kind of fill in some shadowed areas. I'm using a shadowing technique that's all with lines. And so when I lift it up, or you can kind of see it a little bit better once the light is directly on it and not on the light box, where it's a soft shadow, I'm doing just, a few lines. And if it is a darker shadow, I'm doing either cross hatching or more lines in the same direction. And you kind of want to make those lines go in the shape of the area that you're in. So like on the eyelids, I'm kind of going up slanted with the shape of the eye towards the eyebrow, like on the cheekbones. the cheekbones, it's going straight down from the ridge of the cheekbone down to the jawline. From the lips, kind of coming out from the inside of the lips out toward the outside. And when you're able to see it in the next little clip, once the Lightbox is changed, you're able to see those shadows and that directional patterns that I've done. But yeah, so, and then also too, like, I feel like if you're doing this as a painting afterwards and you want to keep those lines in there and not erase them, I feel like they look kind of cool too if they're all uniformed and they feel like you know the directions that they're going in and they're more on purpose and not just like, oh, I think they wanted it to be shadowed there, but it's not shadowed enough. If those lines kind of poke through, I still think it looks on purpose and intentional and really cool too. So I'll let you kind of work on yours and you can kind of check back and forth between mine and yours, and then I will explain the next step. Now we have basically your coloring book style or comic book style kind of outline of your portrait. And now we are going to be doing the same exact thing, but putting it on our watercolor paper. And you can see here how much easier it is to see than when it is on the black and white printout, because all of those lines are the only lines that are kind of letting the light go through with the Lightbox. So making this next one a little bit sharper, being more comfortable with your lines, knowing a little bit more since you've already drawn it twice now, that this third time you kind of like, okay, this is how I want to do this. I'm comfortable. I'm going to add these lines here. I'm going to kind of redefine my shadow lines. And I know the directions that I think it would look a little bit better if I make it a little bit more slanted. But those steps are important when you're learning and starting to practice, because you're going to get more comfortable with that specific drawing or painting. So having those little extra moments with it, you're just going to be that much more comfortable, and then have that other second and first reference photo to use once you start painting. Right, so we're just going through adding more shadows, adding that cross hatching that I was talking about in the deepest and darkest areas. And I know that I'm going to be making those a very heavy, very saturated amount of black paint. So I'm not too worried about making them too dark. And the more layers that you kind of do too, it's going to be easier to see your little lines, your guidelines, we'll call them, when you put the paint down too. So if an area is super dark on your painting and on your reference photo, you can put the lines pretty heavy because you know you are going to do that area in a very dark saturated amount of paint too. So don't be afraid of making them too dark. And you know, too, it's just going to look like a high contrast kind of painting also. But to get an idea and to make it a little bit more visible, I made them a little bit darker too. Okay, are you still with me? Now we get to paint, and we are only using one color. So in grayscale and most times watercolor, we're going to think about the lightest, the midtones, and the darkest areas, and this is absolutely no different than anything else we've done. And even though there's a lot more placement and things where you're supposed to put the paint, you guys have done this already because it is just an outline, but it is a little bit more intense of an outline. So this first wash is your lightest gray or medium gray, and you're putting it pretty much top to bottom and a little bit different washes because you know some areas are going to be darker, so you can put a little bit more. But then you really want to make sure that the areas that are white in your painting or a very, very, very light gray don't get anything and leave it negative space in just the actual sheet of watercolor paper by itself. So you can kind of get an idea and you can fill in all of those shaded areas and just kind of play with it. The awesome thing about doing one color and one color only, especially with Peerless, because I feel like they lift very well, especially this black is one of my favorite to do that method where you drip water down and then pull it up with the paper towel. If you make any area on this too dark, this paint lifts off beautifully. So don't worry about being too dark, but you definitely want to leave those negative spaces like on the cheek that's towards the light source, the nose, that little bright highlight in the lip, and you know, all around that one little kind of strip on the what is that called? The cheekbone. Leave that, make sure there's like a whole little section, negative space, just the watercolor paper, and fill in the rest of it with that medium light gray. not so bad. Looks a little crazy, but it should. And now that is a lot of paint on that painting. So you're just going to walk away for 5 to 10 minutes, let it dry. Doesn't have to be completely dry because we're still making things a little bit softer, but you want to let it dry. And then you're going to come back and you're going to make the next level of darkness and start getting an idea of where you want those deep shadows to be in, like just like your reference photo. Again, working with that one tone, which is so great that you can be like, oh wow, I can really see. And the other thing about watercolors is you think that it might be really dark when you put it down, and by the time that it dries, it's actually lightened up a few shades too. So you're not gonna get those black dark tones unless you do a couple washes over it as well. So as you're going, checking back and forth between the reference photo and the painting, and just start playing around with those shadows. Sometimes you're gonna love it, and then other times you're gonna be like, oh, I'm into it, and then take a step back, you're like, oh my goodness, that looks so blotchy and disturbing and looks like a skeleton or whatever. If that happens, just kind of re-wet the area gently, because you still you wanna preserve your watercolor paper, and kind of soften it and pick up some paint, put a little bit more down, kind of let it dry a little bit. You can blend areas. That is the whole purpose of only using the one color, is to kind of get an idea and get comfortable with laying down paint and seeing how it layers, and seeing how you can take some away and how you can soften it and how you can blend something even though if it's already been dried. And you know, you're not worried about mixing anything and the tones being the right way. You just basically trying to figure out levels, light and dark, and those shadows and everything in between there. So yeah, so now I've done that first and second, and now I'm going back again with my third and even more, working those darker areas. And yeah, so I'll kind of just let it play through a little bit. Definitely if you need to follow along, or pause it at any moment too to get caught up, that's totally fine too. And I will check back in with you in a little bit. So this is something I wanted you to focus on a little bit too, is that see how blocky that cheekbone kind of area shadow is? And in the next clip, I think I might have, I don't know what happened to the clip. All I did was go through with my water reservoir brush and connect that top cheekbone shadow down to the chin area a little bit more like it has in the reference photo. And you can see in the next clip that it just kind of softened it. But then what happened is that my paint was too wet, the area was too wet, and then I got that darker little like lip there too. So all of these things can be fixed and changed a little bit over time. So if you feel like, yeah, like that was obviously like way too heavy of a block all in one area, and I was able to soften it. So now we are working on the smaller details, which I love, into the eye and just getting the roundness in the shape. One of the main things about eyes, especially when you're using the one color, is that that top eyelid has a pretty good highlight and lightness to it that gives it the round shape of the eye. So if I were to give you a little bit of advice while doing these eyes, make sure you don't put any paint on that eyelid with that light source on there, and it's gonna be a little bit more dramatic and it's gonna pop a little bit more if you have that little bit of light area. So, but yeah, again, following along with the reference photo. If you saw the eye tutorial, we did a little bit more in depth with the iris and eye shape, but we're kind of just going straight from there. The eyebrows, definitely get comfortable doing individual eyebrow hairs and letting them dry, and then when they're a little bit lighter, and then kind of redefining them again with that second wash to make them darker. But they will look more natural and like a nicer shape if they are individual hairs over than just doing like a big, you know, triangle, long triangle shape of an eyebrow. But, and then, yeah, I mean, it's just honestly going back and forth, looking, reference photo, getting the curves right. And I kind of drew these two little circles for her bottom lip because she has a real nice pout and like plumpness to her lips. So I really wanted to make those stay. So I wanted those highlights to stay in there. And then when I'm doing those shadows, I'm kind of following the round of those two little circles with my shadows, and that's keeping that fullness in the center there. And then when it dries a little bit, then I'm gonna go back through and add individual, it's almost like doing eyelashes or hairs, but it's like the little creases in her lips. And you need that lip area to be completely dry before you do that second coat too, to get those kind of defining little lip lines. But yeah, everything you do, if you want it to be sharper and more defined and darker, you have to let it dry completely and then do the next layer and the, you know, the next layer and saturation of however much paint of black you want to add. But sometimes it's a little slow process and just small changes, and when it dries, it's a little bit lighter, and you're like, oh man, okay, I have to do that like 5 more times. Or getting comfortable with the amount of paint that you put on your brush and having a pretty heavy, dark, you know, heavily, what's the right word? Just a lot of black on your brush. And if you're comfortable using that amount, that's great. Some people like to go a little bit slower and add more layers and get that darkness over time over multiple washes. So just depends on you and the confidence that you have with your paint. Okay, so I'm gonna add some hair now, and I do hair tutorials for Peerless when I absolutely love getting highly detailed and individual strands of hair. I decided to make this more of a softer hairstyle just because it's already going to be it was over an hour to paint this. I made it into a 40-minute video. But if you guys like these portrait ones and would like, you know, an hour and a half video, I could do that. But yeah, they're going to be definitely lengthy. So for this first one, I am mostly just getting the general shape and highlights of the hair and letting it be a softer, kind of more abstract background for the face portrait itself. Again, one of my absolute favorite things about Peerless and their lifting capabilities is I was able to get those hairs on her upper forehead there by doing that heavy layer of black and all of that shadowing. And then all I did was put a puddle of water and then dragged my brush through the area that was already dark and then put my paper towel over it and lift it up, and I got all of those light little baby hairs to come back. I have had other classes where people were doing the same tutorial but not using Peerless, and they were not as successful lifting the paint out. So it might just be that, you know, that it's, especially with the black and the white, because I think it was a feather class that I did, and we were doing all these little white dots on a black feather, and it turned out so pretty, and someone did it exactly the same we did, but not with Peerless, and it just didn't get the same effect. So another bonus, if you're using Peerless, which I hope you are because they're amazing, it's a really cool and beautiful effect that you can try and you can do to get those little baby hairs. All right, and so I am kind of losing my eyelash lines, and I do want to make them a little bit more funky and kind of a little bit more stylized. So I am using my black artist pen. And again, if you watch the eye tutorial, I like to do my eyelashes in a little swoop from that little like water line, and then do a clump of 3 lashes that end in one swoop up into a single lash. And that is just my little personal trick that I have found that makes it look a little bit more natural and kind of just doesn't look like individual doll lashes that kind of just look a little bit too uniform and creepy and just weird. So I like doing a little swoosh and then 3 at the base that turn into 1 eyelash by the time it gets to the upper area. And yeah, defining some eyebrow hairs and all the little super dark in shadow areas and the outline of the iris. I think I do a little bit, but whatever you want to do. I think I do a little bit on the lip too. Yep, on the lip, that nostril that's the deepest in the black. And yeah, just kind of filling in different areas, and then just kind of taking a step back and looking at it and being like, am I happy with it? Checking it from my reference photo to there. Another amazing trick, which is so simple and so weird, is if you take a picture of your painting and you look at it on your phone next to the picture of the reference photo, you will see a million different areas where you can change and improve to make it look like the reference photo. But for some reason, when you're just looking at it with your bare eyes down, you know, on your table that you're working it on, you don't see all of those as much as you see it on a screen next to the reference photo. It is so weird, but for some reason when you have it, I don't know, like in a different area, I don't really know how to explain why it is, but I do that a lot, especially when I'm working on my giant like 30 by 20 paintings, my commission paintings, is I can take a picture of it and then I'll go take a break. I'll drink a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and I'll just stare at it, and I will be able to pull out all of those areas that need improvement that I need to work on, so much more than trying to look at it just as I've been working on it that whole time. So maybe just seeing it in a different form helps a lot. So I think it probably would help you too. So now we are going into doing the white highlights. and I am doing the eyes and the kind of the shine line and the reflection. And let's see, I do little dots in the inner kind of tear duct areas, and if there's any folds in the kind of crow's feet area or on the upper eyelid, I do like tiny little flecks. Yeah, just kind of all around. And you guys know I love my white highlights. So, and then we also doing in the reference photo, she has little baby lashes on that bottom row, but they're so blonde and translucent and they're so pretty that I kind of wanted to do that on her painting, but make them a little bit more dramatic. So having the white eyelashes on the bottom with that dark black shadow underneath, and the contrast is so pretty, and it makes the eyes and the eyelashes pop quite a bit too. So do some on the eyelashes, and all of the eyelashes on the bottom are in white. And yeah, we're getting pretty close to the end. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I love doing portraits and its eyes, and yeah, I just think humans are so pretty. So yeah, next class we are going to be doing the same exact reference photo, but we will be playing with 3 colors instead of the 1. So seeing how we can mix those together to get some tones, but also trying to have a little bit more creative and playful, and having those bright tones but still get the depth and shadow and face shape, just like we have this. So we will be using this painting as our reference photo in the next painting with 3 colors. So I really hope you tune in next week, and I really hope you share your paintings, because I honestly cannot wait to see them. So yeah, and I'll just let this play till the end. And I almost forgot, after the white highlight, it is probably my second favorite thing to do is freckles. So we are going to be doing a gazillion freckles on her, and I would start with a puddle of a dark to medium wash of the black, and then just kind of start doing the freckles. I like to do freckles in kind of like a 3 freckle pattern, and then or a spiral pattern. I feel like it looks a little bit more natural than kind of just going for. You could go for it. I mean, just go for it. Freckles are great, but yeah, try not to put them in like a direct line, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like if they look a little weird if they're too uniform, or in a line, or like, you know, I don't even know, too much of a pattern. Like you want them to be their own thing. So yeah, no lines, and maybe little groupings look good. But yeah, I mean, they're freckles, so go for it. Yeah. Stardust. Someone said that they had stardust on them, so I think that's the cutest thing ever. So yeah, all right, now I will let it play to the end.
thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends, and we will see you next time.